In the past few weeks, I've done 13 level 1 to tier 15 runs, and in this video, I'm going to review them all. Right, I'm gonna start off with the Cold Sorceress. For Cold Sorceress, I was using Cold Infused Ice Nova for clear with Snap. Snap would generate cold infusions. I would also use Frost Walls. Frost Walls you can explode. I would explode them usually with either Frost Bomb or the Cold Infused Ice Nova. To generate cold infusions against single target damage, I would use Frost Bomb with Spell Echo and Overabundance. So Cold Infused Ice Nova has pretty good AoE radius. Chronomancer also gives you gives you increased area effect with the Sands of Time. And it was rather easy to get cold infusions because you just use Snap on frozen enemies and that would generate your cold infusion. Of course, also Snap proliferates. So you can even get 3 to 4 cold infusions per cast sometimes. In my opinion, the Frost Wall is very clunky on single targets. This Frost Wall will deal 80% less damage in the first 0.5 seconds. Some enemies, if you cast Frost Walls on top of them, they will explode a portion of the Frost Wall instantly. So in this case, the single target damage is much worse. For example, the Doriani form, where it goes into his, I don't know, is it some kind of robot or something? Frostwall will struggle against him. So once you have good gear, I would go Frost Darts. Thing around Frostwall is a little bit difficult in my opinion. You have to explode these Frost Walls, basically 2-button, and you can also end up blocking your own path with Frost Walls by accident. And it's also not very good against mobile targets. Next up, the Spark Stormweaver. Early on, this build is very reliant on Overstorms. I would basically do +2 limit on Overstorms through 1+1 limit through the passive tree and the other one through the Overabundance support gem. And if you use Unleash, you would cast 3 at once, 2 per Unleash seal and 1 base. And I played this build without cast on crit because I assumed cast on crit would get nerfed, but it didn't. I did not go cold infusions on this Spark version, on this Spark build, because I wanted a lower base cast time, since cold infused Spark adds 0.5 seconds to the base cast time, and I was also allocating a lot of lightning damage nodes. So this is one of the builds that doesn't deal a lot of damage early on, but it should scale very well. And one thing to note also is that Spark in my run had very high base mana cost, and I was using my mana pot a lot. So next up, the planned Bloodmage. With the planned Bloodmage, you use Entangle for clear, and you could also water the plants with Thunderstorm, and then you can also use Thrashing Vines. And for single target damage, you also use Bone Storm. Bone Storm will apply Impale stacks, which you then consume with Ravenous Swarm, and you also consume the Impale stacks with the Living Lightning. So this was, in my opinion, out of all the builds that I've done, it was the strongest and also the easiest to play in the campaign. Well, one thing to keep in mind, I didn't try like super meta builds like Ice Shot and Twisters and Grenades. It's very good in campaign, but it fell off a bit in maps. And the build has decent coverage, but one thing to keep in mind, Bloodmage Leech is getting nerfed next patch. But early on that should not be a problem, because early on you're mostly relying on Remnants to recover life. And next up, Lightning Arrow, pretty classic build. In this patch and in this run, Lightning Rod was bugged. The surpassing chance to have additional arrows did not work on lightning rods, so I was only shooting out 1 lightning rod instead of 2 per attack, which means I would have had a lot better single target damage, or you would have a lot better single target damage in the next patch when it gets fixed. And of course, lightning rod is static or stationary, and that makes it very bad against mobile targets, which is particularly a problem against Tawakai, for example. In my opinion, Ice Shot is probably going to be better than this. Ice Shot with Snipe, and Deflection is going to get buffed next patch, so evasion-based characters are gonna have better defense. Alright, next up, the Ice Strike Invoker. For this build, I was using Ice Strike and Frozen Locust for clear, especially early on. Later on, I could also do Shattering Palm and Ice Strike. And for single target damage, you would do Ice Strike and Tempest Spell. Tempest Spell is going to get buffed next patch. In my opinion, this build was pretty squishy. I was building hybrid ES evasion. I did not have the fizz mitigation node, and that made it kind of difficult to go without dying for a prolonged period. And I was also doing Hollow Palm. Hollow Palm was very strong early on for leveling. It kind of started falling off in interludes. So there's also Ice Strike is a classic build. It probably would have been better, I think, safer to play Glacial Cascade instead of Ice Strike, since Glacial Cascade is a ranged skill. And one thing to note is that this was the slowest run. It took almost 9.5 hours. Next up, the Lightning Spear Amazon. So I was using Lightning Spear for clear and Primal Strikes for single target damage. Primal Strikes consumes shock to summon spirits. So Lightning Spear has very good coverage, but early on, without any gear, the damage is pretty low. So because of that, the clear wasn't that great, but it has pretty good coverage. And because of that, I would think, so with better gear, it would be a very, very good clearing skill, if not one of the best. And also with Primal Strikes, if you can somehow get Shock Ground or Persistent Shock, it would be very good for this build. Primal Strikes, I think if you have Persistent Shock, is really broken. But I was using Lightning Spear, which also has more chance to shock enemies, and then I would consume the shock with Primal Strikes. And because of this playstyle, I did not have like insane single target damage. And you can play this Lightning Spear also without parry. If you like me and you don't want to parry, you can just go Dap Dance, and then you need to keep your offhand empty. Overall, I think Lightning Spear is pretty fun. If you can like get out good damage, I wouldn't really rush red maps or higher tier maps with Lightning Spear. Alright, next up, the Bear form, Bear Shaman, so Armor Life for defense. It felt a little bit squishy to me. You either need a higher life pool than what I had or stun threshold. Otherwise, you're going to get stunned while you're doing your slams. So slams are pretty slow, and the animation is pretty slow, and you can get stunned during the animation, which is a little bit tilting in my opinion. So I was doing Shaman with empty charm slots, and that allowed me to use Eternal Rage for rage regeneration. And the idea behind that was that I don't have to use Maul as frequently to generate rage. I could just spam Furious Slam, which consumes rage. Your main ability is basically Furious Slam, then you can also use Rampage and the Meteor stuff. I don't know what's called again. And you could also proc the Jagged Grounds with the Shockwave Totem. Overall, a okayish build. I didn't think it was particularly great. I'm like a little bit biased against melee in this game, because I feel like I'm getting stunned a lot when I'm playing melee. Alright, next up, another melee build, the Wolf form. So with the Wolf form, you use Lunar Assault to freeze enemies, and you use Shred. Shred you use on frozen enemies, and if the enemy is frozen, you would create ice chunks or ice fragments, and those ice fragments you can pull together with the Cross Slash. You would do that for single target damage, and then you would also use Lunar Blessing, which calls down moonbeams, and that's very good for clear and single target damage, and also gives you extra cold damage as far as I remember. So Lunar Assault has really low DPS, but very high freeze build-up. You're kind of relying on Herald of Ice explosions for clear. It's very easy to freeze monsters with Lunar Assault because it has so much freeze build-up. But in my opinion, Lunar Assault needs a damage buff. Otherwise, the Wolf form has pretty bad damage on its clearing ability. So because of Lunar Assault's low damage, kind of struggled in higher tier maps on the tier 15 rush. So if I was actually playing this on Leaguestart, I would probably just stay in lower tier maps until I had better gear. And it was also doing Armor Life for defense. Well, also a little bit squishy, but having freeze helped a bit with defense. The single target damage was good with the Shred and the Cross Slash, but nothing particularly amazing about this build in my opinion. Next up, the Plant Druids. Basically the same or very similar to the Plant Bloodmage. You use Entangle, Crashing Vines, Thunderstorm, and Bone Storm. So in this run I had worse RNG than the Plant Bloodmage. So the campaign run was because of that 20 minutes slower. And the overall run was also about 20 minutes slower. It's pretty similar to Plant Bloodmage. I tried to do something a little bit different in this one I did Branching Fissure on Entangle, and on the Plant Bloodmage I didn't do Branching Fissure. Instead I opted for a damage support and I did not notice a difference in clear speed between the two. And yeah, as previously mentioned, plants are pretty good in campaign, but apart from that, there's not much to say. It's not particularly different from the plant Bloodmage, this build. Right, next up, I did a HC run, Disciple of Varashta Spark. So basically the same skills as the Spark Stormweaver. The one thing to note in this run was I had a very high energy shield pull, or not very high, a very high energy shield pull for considering that it was like a tier 15 rush, 5.5k, and that was because I got lucky with a high ES base at the start, and the character felt, because of that, also felt very tanky even against physical hits, because Varashta gets physical mitigation through its Ascensi notable. It's pretty similar to the Spark Stormweaver, except slightly worse damage, but much better defense. And there's a good reason why Disciple of Varashta is the most played Ascensi in hardcore Soul Self-Found. It's just very good defense, and it has faster energy shield recharge because it has -1 to the energy shield recharge delay on its ascendancy, and it also has more energy shield recharge rate if you're on low ES, which is gonna be important in the next patch because they are nerfing faster energy shield recharge and recharge rate on the passive tree. So I think it's gonna be, Disciple of Varashta is gonna be very good next patch as well. Definitely one of the strongest ascendancies in hardcore. Alright, next up, the Essence Strain Contagion Lich, or also known as the Leaguestart Lich. So basically, most people know what Essence Strain does. The Dark Effigies are fairly squishy early on. One problem that I had with this build, basically. Otherwise, you can build very high ES pulls on the Leaguestart Lich pretty easily. Clear is decent. Single target damage is okay early on, I would say. It's pretty easy to play. Solid build overall, and it has been good since 0.2, and they're also not nerfing it this patch. Pretty solid build. Next up, the Stormcaller, Shockchain, Arrow, Deadeye. Most people probably don't know what Stormcaller and Shockchain Arrow does. So Stormcaller, you shoot out an arrow, and after a delay, it will summon down a bolt. And this bolt of lightning is AoE. It has more chance to shock. In most cases, it will shock the enemy, and the shock also proliferates. And then you can consume the shock with the Shockchain. And if you consume shocks, the Shockchain arrow will emit a shockwave. And if you have very tightly packed monster packs, you basically use your Stormcaller, and you can get like big Shockchain arrow procs, which you will see sometimes in this video. But this Stormcaller Shockchain arrow combo kind of felt clunky to me because, as previously mentioned, Stormcaller has a delay. With compressed duration, it's about 1 second. So it's a little bit clunky because of that. The single target damage is worse than Lightning Rod, and definitely worse than Snipe. So I was relying on Freezing Salvo and Ice-tipped arrows for single target. And yeah, it was a Deadeye with evasion, so felt a little bit squishy. Last but not least, the Lightning Bloodmage. I was using Overstorms to generate lightning fusions and also for single target damage and clear. And Arc would consume the lightning infusions to deal more damage and also to chain more often. And for single target damage, I would use all storms with Ember Fusilet. Ember Fusilet can also be lightning infused. Ember Fusilet has a very low base cast time, so it will proc all storms very quickly. And the Ember Fusilet combo with all storms is very potent, especially in the campaign, but it kind of fell off in maps. So in this run, I made the mistake. I didn't do the Unleash Overstorms combo. I was just casting single Overstorms. The Arc is pretty, I would say, is an okay skill. One thing to note with this build is, or with this Ascensi, is that Leech, previously mentioned, is going to get reworked. And another thing to note with this particular run is that I didn't get a high enough Boss Bomb because I just couldn't find enough skill gems. So because of that, the single target damage was suffering a bit. And otherwise, this build is like, I would say, slightly worse than plants. So if you don't really care about the most optimal build, and you're like open to try something new, Lightning Bloodmage is not that bad in my opinion. Not that much worse than the Plant Bloodmage. Yeah, and that was it. Probably gonna stream on Leaguestart on Twitch as well. I don't know what I'm gonna play yet. Probably a Sorceress. Right, that was the video. Thank you for watching.